I've built this cozy house on top of a cliff platform against a tree in the bog biome on Genesis Part 1 in ARK Survival Ascended. I've used a few different skins for this, although you can definitely make this building without any skins, just using the normal vanilla texture as well as the frontier skin from the Bob Tall Stills DLC. But in this build, I've used a bunch of free cosmetics so you can easily install them. I've used the CKF cosmetic, where I've only used basically the settler tier and a little bit of the village tier, which are both free to access. Then we have the Shanty skin for some of the roofs and pillars. We also use a lot of the Atlas structure skin, which is also a free cosmetic. And then finally, we've used a little bit of the Wasteland skin for some of the roofs. And then some additions you can make, but are definitely not necessary. For the cliff platform, I use the Elven structure skins because they add some beautiful lights underneath the platform. And for some of the ramps, if you want to turn them into like a thatch kind of look, the Viking Builders cosmetic has some really great option for that too. But in all, you should have a pretty nice cliff platform base with space to park your tames, for example the Bloodstalker, and of course a base with room for your crafting, storage, and even a greenhouse all the way at the top. Hello there survivors, and welcome back to another build tutorial on my channel. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to build this base, but it's very important to keep in mind that this is a cliff platform build against a tree, so it will kind of vary based on the exact location you're building and which tree you're using. Even the two versions that I build, you know, the original design that I did when I was designing the base and the one that I built for this tutorial, are slightly different because the back of the building you'll need to adjust to your tree. Of course, you can also build this not against a tree but against a cliff, and then you would still have to adjust, of course, for the exact spacing at the back to make it fit with the cliff you're using. I'm not entirely sure how well this would work on official with clipping into landscaping. I don't really know, I don't play official, but you might want to try that out a bit before you dedicate yourself to building the whole build. And then finally, of course, if you like this house and you want to build it without a cliff platform, just out on the ground somewhere, you can definitely do that. You'll just have to kind of mirror the design of the front onto the back of the building to make a fully realized build. But if you like these types of build videos and you want to continue to see more, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, but feel free to leave your suggestions for future builds down in the comments below. Okay, so of course an important detail about building this base before we dive into actually building it ourselves is it's built on a cliff platform attached to the side of the tree, in my case, on Genesis in the bog. And if you're wondering for the exact location where I built this original base, it's right over here on the map at these coordinates. Of course, you can try and find any decent tree where you can have most of the cliff platform available for building, and then it should totally work. But if you're building somewhere else or on other maps, you can build this pretty much anywhere. Of course, it's easiest if you build somewhere against a cliff, against a big tree like this, because then you don't have to build the back, and the tutorial of course won't feature the back of the building. But if you really wanted to and you want to build this base either somewhere where you have to whole build, or you know, maybe not even on a platform per se, you can definitely do so. You would just kind of have to mirror what we do on the front on the back of the building to complete it like that. So yeah, just a important heads up before we head into the tutorial itself. So of course we are starting with a cliff platform. I'm using a wooden one. You can really use whatever you want, and especially if you're skinning this, you don't have to build the base out of wood because, well, it doesn't matter because you'll change the looks with skins anyway. I found a pretty decent tree over here again for the tutorial, I think. So I'm kind of looking at it so that I at least have half of my platform usable for building. That's a pretty decent space to use. Of course, we're going to still expand the outside area of the platform, but this gives us, you know, enough space to be working with. So to get started, we will place a pillar because we're going to be building the platform on pillars for the main building rather than just using foundations. You could use foundations instead if you prefer, but I like the look of it being a little bit higher than the main platform. So we're going to go in just a little bit. It's, I guess, roughly, I don't know, what would it be? Two beams, kind of. But just a rough estimate. And then we want to have one beam going off to the side before we have another pillar. Then we'll have two beams going out before we have another pillar. And then finally, two more beams before the final pillar, which will be the corner of this platform. Now, eventually, of course, we're going to be expanding the entire cliff platform with ceilings. So for official, it would be really good to check if it will allow you to do this. I don't know if it would. Otherwise, I don't know really how you would solve this, because, well, we want to utilize the space. I guess you could just move the whole building a little bit backwards so that all of the, pillars are going through the platform, because that should work. And that way you would be able to build the entire house, just that you might lose a little bit of the space on the inside if you have to move this pillar a little bit towards this side, of course. But now that we have this, start going here, we want to have the half pillars on top of these corners. We can also have our ceilings here behind this as a first layer for the platform that we're working on. And then here at the very end, of course, we want to make a way up to the platform. So we're going to add a staircase over here. And then right next to it, we can have our pillars again to kind of end that side of the build. And then all the way along the edges here, of course, we can add in our railings just to make it a little bit more secure. And here underneath, we can just use the scaffolding pieces from the Bob Tall Tales DLC. Or alternatively, you could just use slope pieces, slope walls. And then use one of the other skins that I'm using, the CKF skins. They also have a scaffolding piece that looks pretty nice. So yeah, it's either or, doesn't really matter which one you prefer using. As for skinning all this, we want to use the Atlas skins, which are really good. They kind of give us these pirate themed structures, which I quite like the look of, with the robes, etc. around the edges. And we want to use that for all of these pillars, as well as for all of the ceilings that we have. And then for the railings, we wanted to use the CKF settler skins, because you get these nice randomized broken down railings, which I think add a lot of character to your build. Okay, so then we're going to go around the corner. We're going to go out by another 2 before we hit a pillar. We continue that a little bit further for another pillar, and then once more before we have a final pillar here. Then we can actually come one forward before we add in a pillar. That is going to be that for now. We can also continue our ceilings, of course, and here in the front we want to go across by 4 in total. Won't allow us to do that right away, so for now we want to place a temporary pillar there. Then we want to expand the ceilings and add the pillar on the corner. Then we can take this one away again. Then we want to go back to our beam, same over here, bring the pillar back down, and then go out by 2 over here and have another pillar coming down. Again, this is just over the edge, kind of sticking out, but as soon as we expand the platform, that doesn't really matter anymore. And then over on this side, we're actually go back quite far. So this is the first 2, then we'll go to 4, then we'll go to 6, and then we'll go to 8. It's pretty much as far as you go. Sometimes it can go a little bit further. It kind of depends on the tree, of course, because if we look at the original that I did, you can see it goes way back even further. I think it's about 10, and then I even rounded off to add a little entrance. So again, in some of these cases, you might have to adjust it to the cliff or the tree or whatever you're building this against, but yeah, you at least want to go as far back, up to 10 in total. In my case, it's just 8, and then the final pillar is actually already inside of the tree. Again, that really depends on the exact tree that you're building at and the exact placements of your cliff platform, which is what makes this tutorial a bit more difficult maybe than others. Then we want to start by filling in our ceilings here. We want to go as far back as it will allow us to go. We want to do the same thing over here. Just go along these edges and just start filling it all in as far as possible, just to get a little bit of workspace ready for our actual main build. Now, of course, we won't be able to go and add ceilings everywhere. So what we want to do is then, of course, add in some additional supports just to make sure that we can actually keep going. There's no real need to make this a nice pattern because you won't really see most of this, and otherwise you can always clean it up later and remove the temporary pillars if you want to have them in better spots. But yeah, you want to fill this entire area in so that we know what we're working with. And then of course we want to take out our half pillars, add them on top of all of these corners, all of the pillars that we've placed, just to give this platform a bit more character. And then of course we also want to take out the Atlas skins themselves again, and we can actually go ahead and start skinning this entire platform that we've just built to those skins. If you don't want to use the cosmetics that I'm recommending, especially all of these free ones, so you can just install them and use them for free, then of course a great alternative within the base game would just be using the frontier skins and maybe combining it with the normal wood textures for still a pretty nice looking base. So it's definitely possible without cosmetics if you don't want to install them. But again, pretty much everything that I'm using here is free, so it's quite easy to get these skins and start building the exact same thing as we're doing in this video. So yeah, there we go. We've made the platform. Then of course you want to take out our railings, basically go around the edges here and add them in to make sure that we have this whole platform kind of surrounded with the railings. And then of course we can take out the settler skins again to add in those randomized railings for a really nice look. And we want to do that all the way around, of course, until we're back at where we left off. And then yeah, we have those railings nicely in place and we can get focused on building the actual main structure itself. First, before we do anything else, we want to add in these stairs here in the front so that we have a nice path up to our build. We can also change all of those skins and once again add some railings around the edges just to make it look a little bit nicer. And yeah, then we have the platform ready to start building. Okay, we'll start once again here on this side. So from this middle bit of the first section that is too long, we want to go in by one and place a pillar that is too high right over there. Then we want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before we place another pillar. And that's kind of the start for this building. We can actually also lay down our beams to lay out kind of the shape of the build itself. And again, we're just going to be building it right into the back of the structure, in this case the tree, of course. And then we can just fill in this entire wall all the way through. And then actually what we want to do here at the end is add a little quarter wall height all the way through, just to expand this a little bit further. And we can change all of these to those Atlas skins again for the nice look. We want to do that for this entire wall, and of course all the way through for these beams. Around this corner we can also just fill in the entire wall. You could add windows if you really wanted to, but personally I would use this wall for the new bounty board. You could use that on the side to add some decorations, or you could add that here, kind of depending on what you prefer. Then we want to take out our ramps. We want to add them in over here. So we want to have 3 ramps coming off those walls and want to expand them a little bit further down before we add in our quarter ramps to kind of go around the edges of this and expand this a little bit further, just to give it a little bit more detail, and this is going to add in a nice little workspace, or you could have some storage here, park some small creatures, whatever you want. Here in the corner we want to add some thin pillars as some details, and then we want to take out the Shanty skins, which are also a free cosmetics. We want to use that on the thin pillar as well as on the entirety of this ramp for a very nice like little texture for this roof. You could of course change it out with different cosmetics if you prefer the look of something else, but I think these textures are actually really nice. And then for some additional details, we want to take out our sloped walls. We want to add them here along the edges, just as a little bit of supports all the way up to the building. And then using the CKF Settler scaffolding skin, we can add some pretty nice details to them. And if you really want to go all out, it could be really nice to also add them in over here, just to make it kind of look like everything is being properly supported for this building. And again, it gives you a nice little space for a little work area, or park some small creatures, do a little bit of breeding, whatever you want. But most importantly, it adds another layer to the outside of this build, which of course is always a nice addition. Then we want to take out our quarter ceilings, go here along the edge to begin with, all the way over to the end, and then all the way across until we basically move into the tree itself. And over here we also want to make sure that we continue this all the way back into the tree as far as it lets you. Then we can take out our normal ceilings and fill in the rest of this shape. So this is basically going to be the next layer and another room for us to utilize. The ceilings we can all skin with the Atlas skin as well for a really nice texture. I really like the planks on these. Again, I've said it in many videos now, but I really wish we would have gotten this maybe as a second set for the Tides of Fortune DLC. Seems like it would be a great fit for a little bit more of the piratey textures. Then here along the outside we want to add in some quarter walls. This is only necessary if you're using the CKF cosmetic, because then we can change these in some really nice support. If you don't use that skin, you can kind of skip this step until we start working on the rest of the walls again. But yeah, once we've placed all of these in, we want to use the scaffolding skin. We want to go through the variants until we have this support. And then we can add those in as, yeah, little supports along the edge of our building, which will just give it a little bit more details and, yeah, some nice supports for the next layer. Then over here in the corner, we want to add in a pillar. Then we want to leave a gap of 3, well, technically 6 because it's quarter ceilings. But yeah, right there in the middle, we want to have another pillar like that, and then we want to have beams going along the edges, again just building it back into the tree on this side, and then all the way here along the front until the end. Now as we're using the settler skins, the CKF settler skins, then we don't need to have any physical windows because we can use the window skin for some nice windows. You can also change kind of like the details along the sides, but you can see it will change a normal wall into a window. If you're not using this and you may be using the frontier skin, or you're just using the normal vanilla textures, obviously you'd have to place down an actual window to make this work. And then here on this side we can add in 2 more windows kind of there in the middle. Then we want to start shaping up this building a little bit by placing down the rest of the walls just like this, giving us a nice foundation. And then we want to take out the quarter walls here in the middle before we take out our shallow slope walls again to give this whole little room an extra shape. Then we want to start skinning it all. We can skin the top layers here first. We can just go across like that to give it a little bit more details. Then here on the sides, I like to play with some of these patterns. So for example, we want to do those ones, then we want to flip it around and add them in like so, and then the normal one right there in the middle, just because it adds some extra details to it. Then of course we can also skin the beams and the pillars. You'll see they will get a little bit more narrow, but I think this texture is a really nice one. So let's do the same thing here over on the front. And then of course we want to play around with some of these patterns again. So I would start right over here. Then I'm going to place another one of those right there as well. And then we can have the opposite ones right above it again to create a kind of nice pattern going on. We want to do those again over here. Then we want to flip them around for the rest of it, and then just use the blanco one on top, just again to create some nice patterns on these walls. And if you want, you can easily hang like a trophy on these walls to add a little bit more detail to it. Then we want to take out our ramps. We want to start filling in this roof of this building basically. So we want to bring this all the way across and then up by 2 in total, of course, and then back down on the other side. Now again, I'm not sure how official handles this, how far you can clip them in to the trees or cliffs depending on what you're building in. Of course, you want to make sure that you leave no gaps. The worst case, what you can always do is kind of to find the last wall you could place before it clips into it, and just add an internal wall if you prefer that, or if that's easier on official. But yeah, at least we want to place down these ramps as part of the roof. Then we want to take out our quarter ramps, add them here in front all the way along the edge. You can do the same thing along this edge into the tree. And then of course making sure that this sticks out a little bit by having all quarter ramps all the way through. Taking out the settler skin again for a really nice looking roof texture for this entire section of the build. I think this adds a lot of character to the building. I in general really love these settler tier skins from CKF, and those ones are totally free to use, so it's a really good option. And then finally we want to have a nice beam going all the way across the top here, changing that to the Atlas skin for a nice look. And if you want to have some additional details, you can always add a nice little sloped wall underneath here. And then I would probably change it to this scaffolding skin just for a little bit more shape to it. And there we go. We have kind of the side building, which will give us a lot of room. This you could use as a bedroom or whatever you want. And then this I would use as like a crafting hall or storage room, because there's a lot of space and you have use of all of the walls. There's no windows, so you can easily place anything against those walls without any issues. Okay, then for the next step, we're going to start working on the main building. We want to start from this corner, basically, which is kind of in the middle of a ceiling. If we snap to the middle of the ceiling, we get there. We don't want to snap there. We want to snap to the middle of the next ceiling and then bring this up by 3 pillars in total. Then we want to leave a gap of 1, gap of 2, gap of 3 before we place down another pillar right there. And then to make the entrance, we just want to use our quarter walls all the way up to the top. The same over here. And there we go. Then we want to bring in some more pillars all the way again to the top. Then you have kind of 2 options. I'm going to keep an open design, so there won't actually be a closable door here, but of course there will be doors leading off to all of the different rooms. If you don't want to leave this open and you want to be able to close this off, you will need to be able to snap a gate here, which means you need to change these floors, because right now you can see the ceilings don't line up with that entrance. So the way you would do this is to make a temporary little gap over here and basically move that snap point. So you want to take out some quarter ceilings first, add like a little line around this, and then you would have your 2 ceilings right there, so you can snap the gate, and then more quarter ceilings behind it. Again, you only need to do that if you want to be able to snap in a gate as the entrance. If you don't want to do that and you don't mind the open design, then you can just leave it as it was and we can just start skinning the build itself. We do want to skin these pillars to be that Atlas skin, because that will give us a really nice look. And then we'll make our custom entrance over here, which is pretty straightforward. We want to just bring these quarter walls all the way across, and we actually also want to bring them out by 4 over here and another 4 right over there before we bring down pillars again, which will snap to the middle of the ceiling. There we go. And then we also want to bring these quarters across from one side to the other. So then we want to bring in some shape. So first of all, we'll bring out our slope walls. We'll have them here on these corners. There we go. We want to do that for all of those. And then over here, we want to use some shallow sloped corners for the entrance before we add in some railings here to finish that shape. Then we can take out our settler skins. We want to just skin all of these water walls all the way around the entrance. Then we want to change, of course, also those slope walls. And then these we want to change to the second variant before we skin them so that we get a nice looking entrance. Then, of course, these pillars, we want to use the Atlas skin again. There we go. Then we can use the settler skin from CKF on the top layer of all of those water walls around the edges. And then we're going to use this settler's arch skin for those slope walls to get some really nice shape going off to all of those different sides. Then for the rest of the building, we want to leave a gap of 2 before we bring up another pillar, and then another gap of 2, and you continue that as far as it goes before you hit the tree. We can do the same thing here, so another pillar, and then the next one already is going to be within the tree itself in this case. Then for this build itself, we want to of course start filling in these walls. So this one we can fill in completely, and then this one almost completely. The bottom one here, we want to make sure that we have a double door. And of course, in some of these, we can still place the pillar if we can. You definitely want to do that. And all of the pillars will be the Atlas skins, of course, just to keep that look consistent. And then, of course, in this doorway, you do want to add in the door so that you could close it off if necessary. And we actually want to go for the second variant, which is a little bit lower, but it makes sense if we use the second variant of that doorway to add a bit more shape. And then we can skin the entirety of that wall with the CKF Settler Cosmetic. Then the wall here on the other side, we just want to fill in completely. So there's not going to be any windows on this layer, and just a wall going all the way through, and of course all the way in to the side of the tree here. There we go. We want to skin all of these again with those Settler CKF skins, and then we have another wall ready to go there. Then we want to take out all quarter stairs. We'll start right over here. Before we go up, we want to go up quite a little bit actually. So just shy of the next pillar, and then we want to have our quarter ceiling before we rotate the stairs and bring it up all the way. Then of course we can take out our ceilings again over here. We can start filling in this floor as much as possible, and we can of course bring this all the way up to the front there. And then over here around the actual staircase, we of course want to use some quarter pieces so that we leave a little space for the stairs themselves, so that you can still go down here and of course access the different layers of the build. I would also probably skin this with the Atlas skins just to make it match the rest, and the same can be said for all of these ceilings up here, of course, making sure that we get the next layer completely skinned. And then if you want to make this look nicer, of course, you can have your half pillars. We can have some nice railings around the edges and some half railings there too. You can of course also add in the railings along the sides of the stairs, so a half railing here, and then we would want to go through the snap points to get there. It is good to have. Why does she keep saying that? It's just off. But yeah, we want to have a railing over there. It might be easier sometimes to snap from the pillar. If it doesn't let you, what you can do for temporary measures is have a full on pillar because they are easier to use as snap points, and then you can kind of cycle through all of the snaps until you get the railings that are supposedly attached to your actual staircase. And then of course you can remove the pillars afterwards. This way you can still use the Atlas skin on all of these for a nice look. Then over here on the inside, we actually want to use a thin pillar right there so that we can have a bit more support. And then of course we want to make sure that we have a railing going down here again. So we'll have to find the right snap point from that pillar that is attached to the rest of the staircase. And then again, if the second half is difficult, we can attach like a full pillar here to use as a snap point so that we can place the railing in. And at the very end, you want to have the half pillar, of course, before we skin it all to the Atlas skin. So yeah, now we have a nice little staircase that we can use to get up to the next layer. We can then also work on the entrance here eventually to make sure that you can access that room. So don't worry about that if you were wondering. But at least it makes sure that we can go up and down. And again, if you want to, you can add in a wall here if you want to block up the tree. But I personally really like the fact that this is integrated into our base design. And of course, we now have access to this room and you can close that off. Okay, we kind of want to make the skeleton for the next layer of the build. So we're not going to go from the front pillar here. We're going to go in by one and place down 3 pillars there. And the same thing on the opposite corner. So that's going to be the corner of the next layer of the build. Then we'll leave a gap of 2 before we raise up another pillar, which we can do on both sides. Then we want to leave a gap of 3. So basically we'll reattach to this pillar. And we can also raise that up. And then, of course, another gap of 2. But most likely, you'll be running into the side of the building by then. So at least the last one, we can just completely fill in. Over here, a gap of 3 is just about going to fit. But definitely the next part isn't really. Maybe you'll be able to snap a wall in there. But even that doesn't seem to be that easy. Kind of, again, very much depending on the tree that we're working with. Then over here to the side, you can add in a doorway right there. That's going to be the door to the side room. And then over here on the sides, we want to make sure that we also can add doors in. So we're going to have these quarter walls on the corners. So first the normal one, then the alternative one. So we can snap in a double doorway on both of those sides. And of course, it also means that we want to add in these doors right there, as well as over here, so that we can access all of those different places. Over here, what we want to do, of course, is make sure that we have our room to enter into. And of course, if the tree comes out a bit further, you can always add the door a little bit further along. We want to make sure that we have only the corner left, and then we can take out our staircase. And then we want to snap that right there in the corner to make it fit. Now we can also add in, of course, a pillar, half pillar on top of that. And then beams just going along the edge here before we add in some railings. So that we have like a nice space here and a nice way in to this side room, basically. To whatever you want to turn it into, bedroom, whatever you prefer. Now we can also skin those walls and the pillars that we have in place. And then you can see that these Atlas skin get some really nice doors and shapes to them. So they definitely add a lot of character to your build. There we go. Now we also want to expand this balcony around the outside so it kind of sticks out a little bit more. And we want to do the same thing here. And in this case, I'm just going to run it back in to the tree because I don't have a lot of space left. Just for your reference, in case your tree kind of curves off, you can see you can expand this a little bit further and potentially even add a staircase down or even a ladder down. Again, very much customizable depending on the exact size and shape of your tree, of course. But for the very minimum, yeah, we can have a balcony around this outside and we can have one all the way around this outside too, which is of course a nice addition. Then we can start filling in the rest of this wall because there's nothing really special going on here since it's mostly facing that other building, so we can bring out the Atlas skins and just make sure that we skin the rest of that wall so that that matches it. And you can see we already have a layer there, so we don't need too much over there. Here, of course, we have a bit more options. So for now, we just want to fill in those walls and skin those to be the Atlas skins too. Then for the middle part, we are going to just fill it all in with our walls, but we are going to make it look a little bit nicer. So we're going to have 2 pillars that are going to be 2 high each. We want to skin those with the Atlas skins as well as the walls on the outside. But these middle 2 walls, we're actually going to use the villager skin, glass skin from CKF, and we want to go to the second variant to add in a lovely, nice big window here along the side of the building, which will allow us some, well, natural light. There's not a lot of light, of course, in the bog, but still you get some nice views of your surroundings. Then we bring out our quarter walls. We can bring these all the way up the front here. We want to bring those all the way up along the pillars. And then we can actually add in some more pillars going up the building. We can skin, of course, this all to the Atlas skins to get the right vibe again. There we go. And then we'll make a little addition. So we want to have 2 more walls over here, quarter walls, and 2 more quarter walls over there before we have a pillar on each corner, which is going to be the tiniest little addition. We're going to have 2 more quarter walls there and 2 more over here before we have a full wall right there in the middle. Then, of course, we can take out our slope walls and place them in. Now, of course, if you're not going to be skinning this, you might want to use the alternative variant over there, so there's no gaps between the walls. But if you're skinning it, it doesn't really matter. Then we're taking out all ramps. We want to have a ramp over there and another ramp over that side. And then at the very end, of course, we want to have 2 quarters to give this a little bit more of an overhang to it. Then, of course, here on the front, we want to use the Atlas skin again. But then here for the sides of this part, we're going to use the settler skins around just like this to give it a little bit more shape and character. And then here in the middle, we want to use that villager glass skin again so that we get a nice big window here at the front too. Then we'll actually take out our shallow slope walls again. We can have 2 of them right over here. Then we can take out our full walls, place 2 of them up there, and finally have our quarter walls filling in that gap. And then we can take out the settler skins, of course, again, and skin the rest of this wall. Now, this is a great piece to have some decoration, so either a trophy display with an Alpha Rex head, or if you're using the Summer Bash event at the moment, at least when I'm recording this, there's a really cool Megalodon skull that you can have right in there so that you have those teeth on the wall. It's a really nice way, or perfect place to add a little bit of decoration like that. And then actually for these roofs, we want to use some of the Bob Tall Tail skins. We want to go for the Wasteland ones and skin the roofs just to get a little bit of that grimy, metal-y look on top of it. And then if you want to add more details, you can have a beam there with the Atlas skin just to give it a bit more character. Then we want to take out a half pillar, 1 on this corner, 1 on the opposite corner. Then we'll leave a gap of 3 before we place 1. We'll leave another gap of 3, and then of course, well, as far as it goes, but in this case it doesn't go that far. So in this case, I probably would just add another one right on that corner since, well, we can't really go any further than that. Then we also want to take out our beams. Make sure we add those in along the edges here of the walkway just to give a bit more support. And then of course, finally, we can add in some railings around the outside too. So we got those supports all the way through the end. And then actually here underneath, we want to take out our sloped walls again. We want to have some of them right here, as well as over there coming from those pillars. Not on this side actually, because we're going to do something different there still. But then we can have some nice supports right along the outside, at least for these corners, to make it look a little bit nicer. And then of course, all of these beams and pillars we can change with the Atlas skins. And actually for this layer, probably you also want to just use the Atlas skins on the railings, unless of course you want to go for a different kind of look. But yeah, this is definitely one that looks quite nice. So yeah, we're just gonna skin it all to be the Atlas skins, and then you can see we got the building definitely shaping up already. And of course we're starting to get some proper rooms. We have decent space on the bottom floor now. The next layers are now interconnected, and we just have a few additions to make. Here around the outside, we want to have a thin pillar there, and then if you go any further, you would want one more thin pillar. Then I want to take out my quarter ramps first, actually, which is a bit different than what we usually do. We want to see if we can get the right snap point. Sometimes it just doesn't let you, so the easiest way to do is place a temporary one in the right direction and then the proper one underneath. Then this, we just want to bring all the way up to the side of the building like that. And what we want to do next is go to our full ramps, and this one again might be a little bit tricky because sometimes it just doesn't really recognize the snap point that we're trying to place. So again, you might want to resort to some temporary pieces. So for example, like this. Then if we take out my ramp, should be able to snap it underneath, and I can take out those ceilings. Now this I can just bring all the way across, and then actually we would want to have one more pillar there before we have another layer of those water ramps. But yeah, we just want to fill this in completely, and if we've done everything correctly, this should meet up perfectly with the roof. There's just a little gap between the different heights here. And then once again, we want to use the Shanty skin on these ramps for a nice little look, although you could definitely also use the Viking builders cosmetic and maybe use some thatch instead. Then we can also use the Shanty skin here on those thin pillars just to give them a little bit more detail. So the easiest way to get the supports in is a temporary wall snapped to this well, half pillar, then a quarter wall on top of that before we get our slope wall in here. And we can have those going up like that before we end in a quarter. Then we can of course remove the temporary ones and have a proper slope wall underneath it again, and change that all to scaffolding. And this one actually we want to make sure that we change to this one so that we have the support going all the way through. And you can add that for every pillar that we have. It does of course take a little bit of work. Actually, you probably can also just snap only the water wall there. That's actually way easier. And then of course we just want to bring this across with the slope walls, water wall at the very end, and then remove this one so that we can get the right snap in. And then let's do also the final one over here. Slope wall on top, along the edges, and there we go. The final one, oh no, not the steep one, final one over there. And of course adding in those scaffolding looks so that you have a bit more support. And this is a great place to park your tames, have some melting going on, or whatever you need to use it for. But it does add a little bit more of an extra layer to the side of the building, giving this a way more interesting shape. Then on this balcony, we also want to add a few of these. So we want to add one here, one over there, and if you continue it further, you could add another one over there. But for now, it's just these. Then, of course, we want to have some ramps on top of this. We can have some ramps going all the way across. And, of course, along the outside, we can add in some water ramps just to give this a bit more depth. And personally, what I would do is use the Viking builder skin that I mentioned earlier. And we just want to use the primitive roof, which kind of looks like thatch, which is a really nice addition. If you don't own that, of course, you could use actual thatch, or you can use the Shanty skin, of course, because that is free. And the Viking builder one is a premium cosmetic. You definitely do want to skin these with the Shanty skin, though. And then we can bring out our shallow walls and make sure that we add in some supports like this, just for a bit of extra detail making that look a lot nicer. And again, that gives the building a little bit more shape on that side over there. All right, here on the front, we want to take out our beams. We want to make sure that they stick out a little bit like so. We can actually have two of them over here and then one of them sticking out to that way. Of course, we'll skin them to the Atlas skins, and this will be the start of the final layer of our build. We can take out all quarter ceilings and make sure that we add them all the way here along the edge on one side, and of course also along the other side, making sure that we can kind of expand this layer by a bit more. Then we can take out our ceilings. We can start doing the filling in of this entire floor. We want to do that almost everywhere, of course, but at some point we'll need to add a way to get up and down, and it kind of depends on what you've done below, but ideally you'd want to have a trapdoor right here, or if you can put it one backwards, that's fine too. Again, depends really on the shape of your tree. And then we want to take a rope ladder. I personally like the look of those. I would only use two so that you kind of have to jump up to get it, because that way it's not really in the way if you want to walk underneath it. We will save you a little bit of space on the layer below. Then we want to take out our triangle ceilings. We want to snap them to the walls below so that we can have the three of them just right here in the middle. Have some beams going around the outside, and of course we can skin this all to the Atlas skins. We can go all the way across the very edge to make sure that this is all looking their best again, of course. There we go, all the way to the very front of the building. We're just kind of preparing the floor here. And then for this front balcony, we want to add in our railings, of course. Then we can take out our in half pillar, add them in the corners, and use the Atlas skins all the way round it to create a little balcony. And then underneath, you would want to take out our slope walls again, add them in, and add the scaffolding skins, settler CKF skins on them to get a bit more support going on. And if you want to, and I would probably do this, you can actually add some of those scaffolding skins again underneath. Again, only works if you're going to use those CKF scaffolding skins, but it will add a little bit of extra shape to your build, so I can definitely recommend going for that. And it's a free skin to use, so you might as well to make your building look the best it can do. So yeah, once we've placed all of those down, of course, we're going to go to these skins, and then in this case we need to flip it around to make sure that they're facing the right way, and then we can go all the way across this edge to add in those supports on one side, and then of course also add them here on the other side. So again, we just want to make sure that we apply those scaffolding skins all the way through for some nice supports along the edges. Then we want to take out our greenhouse structures. We want to have a wall there, a doorway here, and then of course we can add in the actual door. Before we take out our slope walls, add them on top and along the sides so that we get this completely shaped up. We can also take out the Atlas skins here and make sure that we change it all. And this is why we can have a greenhouse at top without anyone really knowing it, because, well, with the cosmetics, you won't really know a thing. This, of course, already looks really, really nice with these textures, but we also need to finish the rest of the roof. First of all, we want to take out a wooden roof here along the front, add them along the edge like so, just so that we have a bit of the overhang on the outside before we take out our greenhouse roofs, and we can bring this all the way into the tree for the effectiveness. And we can do the same thing here on the opposite side, making sure that we add it in all the way as far as we can go into the tree itself. We can take out our beams to add on the top of here for some additional details. Then we can take out our thin pillar at the end, and then our normal pillars in between for some extra detail. You can also add in the railings here, except for the last one. For the last one, what we want to do first is have a shallow slope wall. Then we can add in the railing, and then we can change this to the Atlas skins for some additional details here on top of the roof. There we go. And then finally we want to skin the rest of the roof. Now I would again use the Wasteland skins from the Bob Talltales DLC, and I'll show you in a minute why. So first of all, we just want to skin the entire roof. It's a pretty nice roof texture, to be fair, but especially with the variants, you can make it look really cool. So what you can do is you can kind of interact with these to change the variants to a broken down one, which I think is a really nice touch to give your building even more character. And of course, if you do that on both sides, you can end up with a really nice and unique looking roof, which, yeah, it's just a really nice little touch to be able to do. So again, definitely would recommend these skins, but feel free to change it out for something different if you want to go for a different kind of look. Then the next step is to bring those scaffolding pieces that we started with all the way here around the edges of the platform that we've built, just for the extra details, of course, just to make it look a little bit nicer. If you want a really cool wooden cliff platform skin, the Elven structure skins have a really nice one that makes the lights kind of float down below it, which is really cool. And then of course we can expand the platform itself by using some ceilings. So the way that you want to do this is basically alternating. So if we start with full ceilings there, we want nothing there, we want the normal ceilings here again, and then this is kind of the way we want to go across the entire side of the building. There we go. And then we can have on the alternative, we can have our slope walls. We can also have that over here to expand this layer again. And this is kind of how you can make this platform even bigger, which will just give you a ton of extra space, which of course always is a nice thing to have. We just want to keep going around to basically make the platform as big as it can be, which is definitely useful if you want to, you know, have some creatures on here, etc. So you'll just get a bunch more space. And again, it's an alternating pattern, so one layer of normal ceilings, then those triangles, and then a normal layer again, and the other way around too. So we'll get our platform pretty big this way. So again, bringing this all the way across until we meet the very end. And once we've done that, of course, we can go back in to these triangles. I guess you could expand it. Probably would have gone around the corner by now, but of course we can't really see that here. And then we can just continue these all the way around the edges. And again, this will give you a pretty sizable space to utilize, be able to park some tames, you know, Bloodstalkers, whatever you want to use to get up here. The bunnies are pretty bouncy too. You can get up quite high. But yeah, you can see how much extra space that has given us. So then, of course, on the corners, we want to make sure that we add in the half pillars, just as some nice details. There we go. And then for the entirety of the outside, we want to make sure that we use the beams again to kind of make this look a little bit more sturdy. There we go, all the way around the outside until we meet the very end. And of course, on top of that, we can add in our railings. Now, for all of those ceilings, as well as the pillars and the beams, I would definitely skin them to the Atlas skins again to kind of match the rest of the vibe of the building. And for the railings, you can also use the Atlas skin if you like that. You can use the Settler Seek Gav skin that we've used on that edge of the platform, or any other kind of railing that you think looks nice, depending on what you prefer, of course. But yeah, with that way, you get the whole platform base ready to use. As I said at the start, it really depends on the exact shape of the tree, the cliff, etc. that you're building against, of course. But hopefully, this should at least give you the basic idea of how to build this building, and then adjust this as is needed, depending on your exact situation. Now, if we go back over to my original builds to have some more inspiration, as I said, I skinned this with the Elven structure skin for the platform, so we have those nice lights hanging down below it. Of course, you could always try to get like a staircase going down, and on this original spot, there's actually a hollow side of the tree on the inside, so you can actually make a dino pen here on the ground if you want to also have some land tape safe. If you close off the different directions here, I think you can definitely have a decent amount of space for land creatures there too. But yeah, on the platform, as you can see, you can easily park your Bloodstalkers. We have a ton of space on the outside. I've got my little bounty board here as detail. I've got a bunch of like storage here. You could definitely make like a little workspace outside if you prefer that. We've got the market stall out here too, which is a really nice decorative piece, but also pretty practical. Bunch of more storage around the platform, a bit of dino parking here at the side. As I said, I could extend a bit further because it kind of wraps around the tree here, which allowed me to add this little corner, which is quite a simple addition, but just, you know, a little bit more room to do crafting and storage and whatever you need. I also have this cool waterfall features integrated into the platform, which is always great. And then here on the inside, I've got a bit of crafting and storage here. Got my main crafting room over here to the left with some structures. And then we can see we have the little staircase to go up to the next layer, where we have a lovely main room with a bit of a kitchen going on. Then we also have a bedroom off to the side here where we can log out in, which is just a nice and cozy room. And then, of course, we have access to all of the balconies all the way around the platform. In this case, because it wraps around the tree, also have a stairs going down. But also not too bad is that we have a little greenhouse up here where you can actually grow some plants with full effectiveness, which is definitely a big bonus to be able to do that without anyone being any the wiser. And if you're wondering about the plants that I added on top of the building, that's all using JVH Landscaping, which is a server-side mod that you'll need to install if you want to use this. So either on the server where it's installed, or on your single player, of course, you can install the mod easily too. So that is how you build this cliff platform base against the tree in the bog on Genesis. Hopefully you enjoyed this build tutorial. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope to see you again in the next video or the next stream. For now, goodbye.